The Kingdom of Eswatini is a small country facing some big challenges. Landlocked, it is surrounded by South Africa and Mozambique and heavily dependent on the South African economy. Most of its more than 1 million people live in poverty. And it has the world's highest HIV/AIDS prevalence rate. Eswatini means land of the Swazis. Formerly known as Swaziland, King Mswati III changed the name in 2018 to break from the country's colonial past. The king is Africa's only remaining absolute monarch and has ruled Eswatini since 1986 when he was just 18. He's known to spend lavishly on his 15 wives and more than 30 children. Many people in the kingdom are now calling for change. June and July saw some of the largest protests in the country's 53-year history. Violent demonstrations erupted following the death of a 25-year-old law student, allegedly at the hands of police. Many protesters called for an end to the monarchy. Dozens were killed and many more injured after the military and police were summoned to quell the unrest. This prompted the United Nations to call for an independent investigation into alleged rights abuses.
We also call on the government to ensure that there are prompt, transparent, effective, independent and impartial investigations into all allegations of human rights violations, including those by law enforcement personnel in the context of the demonstrations, and that those responsible are held to account.
Besides the king, there is also a government headed by this man, Prime Minister Cleopas Dlamini, who at the UN last month reiterated Eswatini's position as Taiwan's last diplomatic partner in Africa.
The persistent exclusion of the Republic of China, Taiwan, from the United Nations and the discrimination of its citizens in a system meant to serve international citizens is a gross violation of the unshakable principles of the UN Charter.
Beijing is keeping a close eye on the situation and pressuring Eswatini to abandon diplomatic ties with Taiwan. With that pressure and the growing pro-democracy movement, Eswatini may be facing its biggest difficulties yet.
So with today's focus on Eswatini at Expo 2020, let's dig deeper into this small country.
Eswatini's Prime Minister that you just saw there, Cleopas Dlamini, is in Dubai today for National Day, and I spoke with him a little bit earlier. Prime Minister Cleopas Dlamini, thank you so much for coming to talk to us here on CNN. And it's Eswatini National Day here at the Expo. So it's this. As soon as I walked in, I saw two people dressed in the traditional dress like you're wearing. I'm like, it's going to be a beautiful day.
It's been an excellent day, yes, it was.
What do you hope to take away from the first time Eswatini has your own pavilion at a World Expo?
Well, we are hoping to market our economy, our country, tell the people about our culture, our potential for production, investments, and trade. That's what we are hoping to achieve by being here.
Are you making sure that you're getting a big splash here? Because you're a small country surrounded by much larger neighbors, Mozambique and South Africa. So how do you make sure that you're not swallowed by those kind of bigger forces?
Well, we are used to that. You know, everywhere we go, we're probably the smallest country in that event. But we have a big heart, and we are an export-driven economy. So we are hoping that, small as we are, we are going to have a big bite in this cake.
You've only recently been appointed Prime Minister in July, and you came into an economy that's been battered by COVID-19, like many other economies around the world.
Yes.
What is your plan to recover?
Well, our plan to recover is to resuscitate the industrial sector through attraction of foreign investment and also domestic investment. So we are trying to encourage people to come and invest in the economy and also to resuscitate existing businesses that have been battered by the COVID pandemic, as you say.
There's been students in Eswatini protesting. Some of them are boycotting classes. They are demanding political reform in the country. The Eswatini government has now deployed the army to quell those protests. Why did you take that move?
Well, first of all, let me correct the perception. The protests are largely in demand of economic delivery. This is because of the very high level of unemployment caused by the COVID lay off and the shutting down of the economy. So first and foremost, people have been protesting against poor service delivery, and secondarily, they've been protesting against in favor of political reforms. But that's not the primary.
We'll get to that in a moment about the political reform. But why is the military for the second time going back on the streets? Because the last time in June, when you saw again civil society and political opposition groups protesting, 27 people died because of those clashes with the police and the military. So these ends up being quite violent.
Yeah. Well, it's not the army that is in the street, it's the police that are in the streets. So we haven't yet put back the army. But sometimes the police themselves get overcome by these violent reactions. But at the moment, what we are having is not really violent demonstrations. They've been peaceful so far, and the army has not been unleashed.
Do you understand the agitation for political reform, for constitutional reform in Eswatini?
Yes, we do. But they have to follow a particular. We have a constitution. It spells out very well what needs to be done if you want to drive political reform, particularly because this originated from parliamentarians, and parliamentarians understand very well what they need to do in order to achieve those political reforms.
In June, the protesters especially demanded a look at your political structure. Is the king the best way for you to govern yourselves? Eswatini is often mentioned as the last absolute monarchy in Africa. Is that a tag you're still proud of?
Very much so. Remember, our kings don't have a tenure. They don't have a term of office. The king is there for life. This has been the same for kings in the past for years and years. But what we really need now is to ensure that if there are any changes that are being proposed, they follow the constitutional arrangement. Remember, the people that you see on TV is an exaggerated picture of what's happening in the country. The majority of the people, I could say more than 80%, they still favor the existing status quo.
You mentioned yourself how high unemployment in Eswatini is, about 50%. Even graduates struggle to find work in Eswatini. Those protests saw action in rural areas like Manzini and Babane, but also even rural areas. The economy the country is currently set up is not working for the ordinary person.
I don't know if any economy in a developing country is set up for what COVID brought about. But we have the private sector, we have the small enterprise sector. That's the sector that has been shattered by this COVID because it all dependent on the moving around of people. And once people stay in-house, the people in the streets who are doing retail trading, they suffer. And that's when it is magnified.
What is your message for the students, the civil society groups, the opposition in Eswatini who are agitating for change?
Well, my message is that if you are agitating for change, we are going to the polls in 2023. That's the opportunity to go there and vote for change. And if you succeed, you will put the right members of parliament, and those are the people that will go through the political process and introduce the changes that you want. That's the best way you can do it. In any country, it is the constitution that is the primary law of the country. And that's the same with Eswatini.